I made an after-death email that went out before I died, that led to an extremely awkward situation. This starts about 6 months ago. I caught a pretty bad cold that had me in bed for a few days. At the time, I kind of got it in my own head and convinced myself I was probably a day away from dying of the pandemic disease. I had heard all of these terrible stories about people being unable to talk, on ventilators, having final Zoom calls with their families. I didn't want to go out like that, so I set up a dead man's switch. For anyone unfamiliar with the term, it's basically anything that activates when it stops getting input from the user. Common uses are engine cutoffs on the machinery, or that little clip thing on treadmills that pulls loose if you fall off. A less common use is threatening hostages with an explosive device that will automatically go off if you get killed by police snipers. If you've seen a movie where someone is blackmailing someone else and says the information will go public if anything happens to them, you get the idea. So I'm lying sick in bed and I write a series of emails to various friends and family, telling them how much they meant to me, thanking them for supporting me, among other things. The email to my wife has lists of all of my passwords and other info she might need to deal with my passing. My wife is also pregnant, so I left behind a message and advice for my unborn child. I subscribed to a system where I get a link emailed to me once a month. If I don't confirm that I'm still alive by clicking it, after a set amount of time, the emails go out. A few days later, I was feeling fine, and the whole thing now seems a lot more silly. I figure I'll keep it active. There's always a chance I'll get hit by a bus or something, and I liked the idea of having a final goodbye. Over the next few months, I click the link every time it comes in, and on several occasions I add more emails since I have more time. You can probably guess where this is heading. Work gets busy, we're back in the office, I'm not spending all day on my own computer, and I miss a link email. Completely forget about the whole thing. The emails eventually go out. The timing couldn't be worse. It's been a busy week, so it's been a little while since I've talked to most of my family. My wife is out for the evening, so I decide to get baked and spend the night playing video games. My phone is somewhere else in the house, and I'm unaware it's being flooded with messages and calls from people who just received an email from me that starts, "If you're reading this, then I'm dead." My wife comes home early, and I'm not really in a great state to explain what's going on. Eventually, I get her to understand what I've done, and she helps me message and call everyone and explain the false alarm. That was 2 days ago. Most of my family is still pretty angry at me. And there's a pretty even split between people who think the idea was sweet and people who think it's the dumbest fricking thing they've ever heard of. The one silver lining is that I had at one point strongly considered leaving messages telling certain colleagues and family members exactly what I thought of them, but decided that insulting people from beyond the grave was just a little too petty. My wife is fine with it since she never really thought I was dead and was touched by the message I left for her. I've now left a series of paper letters in a folder that can be delivered with a proper setup instead of a randomly timed email. In short, I left a series of messages intended to be sent after my death, and it went off early. Family is mad that I freaked them out by making them think I'd passed away. This is fantastic. I refuse to believe that after enough time your extended family aren't able to find this in the least bit hilarious. Like, I understand being absolutely horrified when you think the event has actually taken place, and that your dear darling son has in fact shuffled off the mortal coil, and being annoyed at him for scaring you like that for a few days. But surely, this got better in the days and months that followed the story. This seems like one of those things that the poor author will have dragged out to ridicule him at every family gathering, and honestly, it's fine. That's what families do. They're definitely not any kind of villain for doing this. They set up a kind and considerate message of pure love for their nearest and dearest. At least it ended up being a message of pure love after you took away all that nasty, vengeful stuff about the people you didn't like. The narrator honestly wants to know what that section was like. I mean, I don't really need to read another beautiful and heartfelt message about the joys of life and things that make it worthwhile. I want to read 8 pages of pure venom from a man who had nothing left to lose and was using some of his last remnants of strength to stab at his enemies from beyond the mortal coil. I bet if you thought you were dying, you could write some delightfully wicked things. Am I the jerk for exposing my parents' favoritism? My parents have always favored my younger brother. I was by no means unloved, but it was blatantly obvious who they cared about more. I worked a part-time job to get my first car, but my brother got one as a present. It wasn't new, but was much newer than my car. It was the same with just about anything else, like clothes, video games, and cell phones. I started paying rent after I turned 18 and got a full-time job, as I'm taking a gap year before community college to save money. I did work part-time before that, but they didn't ask for rent until I was 18. They wanted about $400 a month. That didn't seem so bad overall, but a while back I heard my parents talking about how much they were going to pay for my brother's tuition. I secretly recorded the conversation from around the corner, and then came out asking my parents why they were going to pay for my brother's college but not mine. They didn't notice my phone was recording and just said that my brother needs more help. I asked how so, when I wasn't getting any sort of scholarship and he likely wouldn't either. Then I asked a few more questions about why things have always been this way. They got mad and my father told me that perhaps it's time I moved out because they're sick of keeping a roof over my head. I pointed out I pay rent, but they didn't care. I left the room and in a fit of rage uploaded the video to 2 different social medias I have and ranted about how this is how my parents have always been. Well, a few hours later, my parents were pounding at my door. My dad was screaming at me about how I made them look bad. We fought some more and they left the room fuming. My grandparents contacted me later and said they were appalled and then came to visit with a lot of family the next day. There was a huge family intervention and my parents were made to sit on the couch and look at their feet while being told off. It was then I found out they'd been receiving money for years from my grandparents to help with family expenses. My brother looked like he didn't know what to do, so he sided with the rest of the family and said he's noticed how I'm treated as well. My parents gave me a huge apology that sounded forced. My grandparents have offered that I come live with them soon and will cut off the monthly payments to my parents. My father told me I should never have told the rest of my family and now won't talk to me, and my mother has been crying for days. So I'm starting to wonder if I went too far. Update: I decided to go ahead and call my grandparents and to accept their offer to move in. During the phone call, I asked them why there were monthly payments being sent to my parents. Turns out my parents were living beyond their means for a while because my mother quit her job to be a full-time stay-at-home mum. My grandparents decided to help out by sending them money monthly to help with my parents' mortgage, and also to set aside some of that money for college savings for both my brother and I that was to be split evenly. Turns out my parents only planned to put that savings towards my brother's college, and that's also how they brought his car as well. So from now on, my parents are now on their own financially. Likely, my mother will have to go back to work to help my dad keep up the mortgage. I confronted my parents and asked why they've always treated my brother as the favorite, then asked if there was something I needed to know. Turns out there was nothing. Literally nothing. I'm not an affair baby, not an unplanned pregnancy, they just like my brother more. I was mad as heck and we argued a lot before I left the room because I'd had enough. My grandparents showed up on Saturday with a moving truck. My parents were floored when we started bringing in boxes to pack. My father got in our way and I reminded him how he said that I should move out, so I am. My mother cried some more and said that my father was just angry in the moment when he said that, and they'd been counting on my rent money to help with my brother's college fund. I asked if that meant he'd never have to pay rent like I did when he turns 18. My father then said that since I was taking a gap year to work, that my rent money could have helped my brother, which means they never intended for him to get a job while going to college. My grandpa was enraged and confronted my father, saying he raised him better than this. He chewed him out, saying he's never been more disappointed in him and they'll no longer receive any financial support. He said that he'd disown them both if they ever tried to retaliate against me for exposing them. My father backed down and neither he nor my mother said another word to me. I had a bit of an awkward conversation with my brother as we said our goodbyes to each other. And that was it. I just got in my car, waved and drove off. I'm now fully moved into my new room at my grandparents' house. It's a little smaller, but nice. And my grandparents are very welcoming. I'm going to keep working hard to move forward from here, and I appreciate everyone's support. I plan to keep in touch with my brother in time, but for now I'm going to hang back and see how he is by the holiday. If he starts blaming me for leaving, then I'll know where he stands. I just hope he learns from this and doesn't rely on our parents too much. So, am I the jerk for exposing my parents' favoritism? Goodness me. Yeah, I really can't sympathize with your parents here, as their only reason for villainizing you is for exposing how terribly they were behaving in the first place. As I've said before on this channel, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it probably deserves to be destroyed by it. Clearly, they're mooching off other people and collecting money for said mooching into the bargain. Aside from the audacity to be angry at you when your only wrong is accidentally exposing them, we haven't even touched on their lack of accountability on why they're so negligent and hostile to the author. The update where they just seem to explain that their eldest's money is needed to pay for kiddo number 2, while the eldest gets nothing from anyone, is truly baffling. It's just that everything in their lives should obviously go to one kid and not the other. No explanation. It doesn't even seem like they look at it from any moral perspective, just that apparently this is how it should be. How can your awesome, supportive grandparents give rise to a father like that? If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled Mum Parks on Our Grass. Recently, we moved from Missouri to Ohio for my husband's job. We moved during the summer and have children at 3 different schools, but all 3 schools use the intersection kitty corner from our house. My younger 2 go to primary school here, which is kindergarten through 2nd grade. Since the kids are so young, many parents walk their kids down, but some have recently started driving 2 blocks from their house to the bus stop. Well, there's one mum in this green Jeep that has made it a habit to park on our grass in the afternoon to wait for her child. I didn't make a big deal about it the first few times, but after a week of straight rain during the fall, her Jeep made huge muddy tire tracks in our grass. I'm talking 4-inch deep huge marks where the Jeep was nearly stuck. She had to back up to get out after 5 minutes of letting the tires spin. The following day, I walked up to her Jeep and knocked on her window. I kindly asked her not to park on our grass anymore, especially when the ground was so wet, and pointed to the huge tire marks. She gave me a really snotty look and rolled her window up. I don't like confrontation, so I was sort of relieved when the following day, a Friday, she parked somewhere else. Monday afternoon rolls around and I looked out my window as she's pulling up and see her look to my front porch where I normally sit to wait for my kids. When she didn't see me sitting there, she peels into my grass, onto the same tire marks as before and digs them in another 2 to 3 inches with mud flying everywhere. I was beyond livid, but I knew this wasn't going to go anywhere if I tried talking to her again. So I made a beautiful, professional-looking sign and hung it up. The sign says, "Please do not park on our grass. Smile, you're on camera." So we don't have a camera that points that way, but she didn't know that. She stopped parking there for 2 whole weeks until the rain and snow destroyed our sign. Today was the first day she decided to try parking there again, and I'm so happy she did. Right after she got her kid in the car and went to take off, a police cruiser pulled up and cited her for parking too close to a stop sign. No, I didn't call them. It was all completely coincidental. Ah, hello, sweet, sweet karma. That'll show Karen for taking advantage of someone who sounds like a very sweet and mild person. I'm not exactly Mr. Aggressive, and I'd be right up there having words with someone who decided to excavate my yard with their tires. And you know what? The law would have been on my side too. You deserve the satisfaction of watching this lady get slapped with a parking violation, and her complete lack of consideration landed her with what she was due as well. And her kid got to learn what happens when mummy behaves like an entitled witch too. Everyone wins, everyone learns. Am I the jerk for telling my twin that she should have worked on herself instead of expecting me to let myself go for her wedding? My twin sister, May, and I are identical. At the end of our first year of college, I was in a car accident. I ended up with a facial scar and major trauma. I started seeing a therapist because of the nightmares and the fact that I was panicking any time I got into a car. That led to me realizing there were some deeper issues which we worked on. As part of that work, I got a physical, started working out with a dietitian to fix my diet and the smorgasbord of vitamin deficiencies it had caused. I started working out, strength training 3 days and sprints or HIIT on 3 with our older sister. By the end of our first year of college, we'd each gained about 30 pounds, but by the end of the year, I'd lost half of that, but I was smaller at 134 pounds than my previous 120 because of muscle mass, and that's been my size for the past half-decade. I found a new beautician and she gave me long layers to make my natural curls be curls instead of waves of frizz. I always wanted that, but my old one said I would look bad and refused. I stopped bleaching it and let it go its natural dark blonde and light brown. I stopped spray tanning. Again, that's been my look for the past 5 years. I live in a rural area and the internet isn't great. Things like FaceTime just aren't options, and I can't post a lot of pics on social media because of it. This is relevant because a big issue is that my twin sister May didn't see me over the quarantine. We talked on the phone a couple of times a week, but it mostly revolved around her wedding planning. She got engaged before the Rona put us on lockdown. I wasn't her maid of honor, so mostly I was being told decisions, not involved in the process. When it came to the bridesmaid dresses, May sent our sister, sister-in-law, and me a link and told us to get it in our size. Same with hair and makeup, but we had to arrange for a beautician because May's wouldn't do more than 4, and she wanted her friends at the appointment with her. She didn't do a bachelorette party with us, she did with her friends, or a rehearsal dinner, so May didn't see any of us until the start of the wedding. She was livid. Apparently she thought my sister and I would have stopped working out because of the Rona, even though we did it at home, or that we would have stopped when she announced her engagement so that we didn't upstage her. She was mad because I didn't try to hide my scar and didn't have a fake tan like her. Said it was implied that I should have kept it up. She made several snide remarks before throwing a drunk temper tantrum at the reception, basically accusing the 3 of us, but me especially, of trying to upstage her. I don't have that excuse because I was a designated driver, so sober, but I quite famously have a low tolerance for angry or crying drunks. I told her, if you're so insecure, you should have got off your butt instead of expecting us to lay on ours to make yours look better. It only got worse. Our family is on my side because I didn't start it or do anything, but his family and her friends are giving me crap. To be honest, it's got worse since the incident. I don't really know what set it off then, but it's been worse. So, am I the jerk? So there might be some flack to the author for outright announcing that her sister was out of shape in front of everyone, but yeah, this is pretty unhinged on your sister's part. I guess I can see how it rubbed a little more salt in the wound than usual, given that you're identical twins and your presence is showcasing that you might be doing a better job with what you have, which is a warped perspective all on its own. But it doesn't mean that her behavior is remotely okay. We don't get to be angry at other people for being hotter than us, even on our special days. Otherwise, some of us would be angry all the time. And I'm sure your sister had still done everything within her power to make sure she looked great, and that no one would have noticed if she hadn't pitched a fit. Look, folks, did you see Kate Middleton getting drunk and screaming at her sister in the royal wedding? No. And that was the most televised and well-known version of the sister upstaging the bride, in the same way as this story here. So get some perspective and grow up, sister of the author. My classmate saved goldfish by releasing them into the ocean, and I called her an idiot. My classmate recently made a TikTok, and she showed a group of people at lunchtime. They were next to our table, so I overheard the girl say, "Hey, look at my TikTok I made, come check it out." And in it, she explains how she, quote, rescued goldfish from the pet store and released them into the ocean so they could live free. I was horrified upon hearing this. I love fish and have several aquariums, so I'm fairly knowledgeable on them. I walk over and I ask her to show me the video, and I face-palmed. She asked me why, and I said, "You realize you're actually a moron, right? This is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen." Her friend says, "Well, that's just rude. Why would you say that? Because she cares." To which I had to explain that goldfish are freshwater fish. They can't survive the ocean because it's salt water. So all those goldfish were dead in minutes. They basically choked to death as salt filled up their gills. Lastly, you never release animals into the wild. There are goldfish that are destroying our rivers and lakes because of idiots like her. They say that I'm a bully and walk away. I later get called into the principal's office, who told me I was expected to apologize, and I said no. I stand by what I said. Screw ignorant people who destroy the environment. My parents were called over and I got sent home, and my parents are annoyed that I refused to apologize. I might get suspended. I mean, the narrator just wonders how old the author is for this story. The fish killer's actions are somewhat in keeping with someone around the age of 10 or younger. If they're over that, then they are a scathing indictment of whatever country they come from's education system. Not so much commentary here. It sounds like the other girl meant well. The author probably isn't a jerk for pointing out that the other girl is just mass murdering the residents of her local pet store, but they probably could have been more tactful than just walking up to them and opening with calling them a moron repeatedly to their face. If that was your exact delivery, you shouldn't be a diplomat or anything anytime soon, but as we've established, you could be any age, so you have plenty of time to get some people skills. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.